All right, welcome today to Insert Innovation. I'm your host, Benjamin Janey, and today we are with sports agent, author, and philanthropist, Leigh Steinberg. How are you today?
Nice to meet you, Benjamin.
Likewise. So Insert Innovation is a student-run podcast where we bring on successful entrepreneurs and business executives and talk about innovation. So let's get started. All right, so our first question, Leigh, after attaining your BA and JD from UC Berkeley, I'm sure there were many career paths and opportunities open to you. So we were curious, what was the original inspiration behind becoming a sports agent?
So I was a dorm counselor at Berkeley in the late 60s, early 70s, and they moved the freshman football team into our dorm, and one of the students was the quarterback, Steve Bartkowski. And I had gotten out of law school, traveled the world, was looking at a variety of different offers. But before I ever got there, Bartkowski was the very first pick in the first round of the 1975 NFL draft. And he asked me to represent him.
Wow.
So there I was, brimming with legal experience, never having practiced before. But we got going. He got the largest rookie contract in NFL history.
Wow.
And there really was not an organized field of sports agentry. It was really rudimentary. As a matter of fact, the general manager could hang up the phone and say, "We don't deal with agents."
Wow.
So there was nothing to aspire to. There was no career path out there. We were in the unknown. And so and the economics were very different then.
Yes.
I mean, teams got $2 million as their share of the national TV contract in the NFL, and they now get $300 million. Teams sold for $16.5 million, Seattle and Tampa Bay, and they now have the Dallas Cowboys valued at $10 billion.
Wow. So a lot of growth in the industry since.
Tremendous.
Yes.
You had to be able to visualize the future.
Right.
And I went to owners and said, the real battle here is not labor versus management.
Right.
We shouldn't have ugly individual player contract negotiations pushing fans away.
Right.
We shouldn't have bad collective bargaining with billionaires against millionaires.
Yes.
Let's think about how we can build the brand. Mm-hmm. Can we do an NFL network? Can
right.
we get multiple bidders into the fight for rights fees?
Right.
Can we take Stadia and think of all sorts of ancillary revenue from naming rights to Jumbo Scoreboard to
yes.
how many about the use of the internet? How many utilities can we get from that? So it was envisioning an NFL that today is the dominant sport and the dominant TV show,
right.
but it wasn't back then. It was still baseball.
Wow. That is fascinating. And I think you sort of touched on the question, our next question that we have. So you've represented a record of 8 number 1 draft picks, including Troy Aikman, Steve Young, Patrick Mahomes, and the list goes on. What would you say is one of the most rewarding aspects of being a sports agent?
We ask every player to retrace their roots and go back to the high school community, set up a scholarship fund, or work with the Boys and Girls Club or a church,
yes.
Go back to the campus community and do some program that will allow that athlete to be mentored by the alums. Mm-hmm. And then as a pro level, set up a charitable foundation so that a certain cause that an athlete feels passionate about, and then put the leading business people, political figures, and community leaders on a board. Mm-hmm. So that's like work done putting former running back, putting the 200th single mother and their family into the first home they'll ever own. Or Patrick Mahomes with his 15 and the Mahomies, it helps at-risk kids.
Yeah.
So the most rewarding part is watching the athletes go back into the communities and retrace their roots, and it's seeing the good that these programs can do.
Wow, that's fantastic. I really like the philanthropic sort of nature to the way that you approach sports representation.
Well, athletes can be role models and trigger imitative behavior. And not only can they set up programs that enhance the quality of life, they can also do messaging.
Yeah.
So Steve Young and Oscar De La Hoya, prejudice is foul play. Or the heavyweight champion Lennox Lewis, who I represented, real men don't hit women.
Yes.
And because of their prowess, the rebellious adolescents who may not listen to any authority figures will end up listening to the athlete because it's cool.
Right.
And so that has a lot to do with domestic violence and teaching young men how to treat women.
Right. And helping to cultivate and foster leadership skills from the players. Because whether a player accepts it or not, they have a platform and they have a voice and they are a leader to me.
And they can trigger imitative behavior, and they can make a major difference on societal problems.
Right.
I'll give you an example.
Yes.
Bullying at the high school level. People get bullied for all sorts of sad reasons. But if an athlete will go back and tell those high school athletes, you be the people that go ahead and put your arm around someone who's got a hair lip or has a lisp or something.
Yeah.
You be the person. You can change the culture of that high school because the athletes sit on top of most social structures very quickly.
Fantastic. Now, so we're here today for the Future of Sports panel. So this next question has to do with innovation. What are some innovations that are happening in the league, or just in sports in general, in the next 3 to 5 years that you're the most excited about?
So back in the day, around 2000, the internet had just been born, and I thought there was a need to have athletes up on the internet. So we built a company called Athlete Direct, and you had Michael Jordan, Ken Griffey Jr., and quarterbacks. They were the big athletes, and they shared their weekly diaries. They talked about their charities, and you could buy directly from them. So no one had seen anything like it. We probably put a couple $100,000 into R&D on this Athlete Direct website. And you still had to use AOL to get onto the internet, which you won't remember. And we sold part of our share for $25 million later. So the key is to find a niche in sports, an innovation, a website, something, a new league, something that hasn't happened before, and get in on the ground floor. And what happens in that situation is they raise funding, and if the project makes it, there's a liquidity event, which is either going public or being bought by a bigger company. So we look for that. One of the innovations happening is in health and athletic performance. So most games come down to the very last quarter or the last play, more and more. So can we stimulate energy, endurance, productivity in those critical moments to give a team a competitive advantage over another one? Likewise, if a player in a cap system gets hurt, your left tackle is making $20 million, his backup by definition has to be someone playing at the minimum who's not very skilled.
Yes.
So if you lose a critical player in a cap sport like basketball or football, it's a massive letdown.
Right.
And so I went exploring and I experimented with stem cells and hyperbaric oxygen, a process called NanoBee. These all are anti-inflammatory, faster healing, more energy. There's a process called Bimini, which oxygenates water and you sit into it. And these are going to revolutionize sports. So I'm putting together a company that will take this to pro teams and college teams. And hopefully the key in innovation is once you have the concept, you have to get to market quickly.
Right.
And then you want to establish yourself as being synonymous with the field. So
right.
I still call tissue Kleenex.
Yes.
And people talk about the Mercedes or the Cadillac of cars.
Yeah.
And so you want to be preemptive because every good idea, I can get us ahead by vision. And if you want to be an entrepreneur, you got to read.
Yeah.
You have to understand everything that's happening so you have vision for the future.
Right.
And you can spot the niche, you can spot the opening, you can spot the way to create something that hasn't been done before.
Right. Great point. And I think a lot to do with entrepreneurship, to your point, is this idea of solving problems in society and being innovative enough to create a solution to that problem, but also adds value to society.
So I'll give you an example. I think that if I was your age, my chief concern politically would be climate change.
Yeah.
Because you're going to inherit a world that's very different than what we see now. So if you can project into that. So I created a program called the Sporting Green Alliance and took sustainable technology in wind, solar, recycling, resurfacing, and water to stadia practice fields and arenas around the country to drop carbon emissions and energy costs. So we bring these companies to the venue, and then they go ahead and execute. So it drops carbon emissions and energy costs and transforms them into educational platforms.
Wow.
So millions of fans go to a stadium and they see a waterless urinal and they see a solar panel and think about how they can utilize those concepts in their own homes and business.
Right.
So we put sports in the forefront of rolling back climate change.
Wow, that's amazing. Now we're on the topic of innovation in technology. Can we talk, or can you speak a little bit to how AI is being utilized in sports in ways that is adding value or being an assistant or of some assistance in
So the whole business in sports is the rating of players and trying to figure out who's talented and who's not. And AI can give you a better diagram to evaluate player talent. It can also help you with your fan base and figuring out everything from pricing to what constitutes a great experience. It can also help you in promotions. But we embrace all new technologies. So we have a project where you put on a helmet and you're now Patrick Mahomes in Arrowhead Stadium. And you see the defensive lineman coming towards you, and predicated on what you do with the ball, you can either throw a touchdown pass or get hit and sacked. Right. So it simulates the experience of actually being a quarterback. So virtual reality and then augmented reality are two new forms that sports are embracing.
Wow, that is fascinating. Now, as I mentioned before, a good portion of our audience are entrepreneurs. And you touched on this a little bit earlier, but is there any practical advice you could give a startup team or a founder or an entrepreneur looking to get started in this space?
First of all, you have to do research and understand the basic nature of the field that you're going into. You have to read like crazy. You have to talk to experts in the field. You have to give yourself the best experiential base. And then, is there a problem or is there a need in the economy for a better mousetrap, a new way to conceptualize? And then can you get in quickly? So you need to make sure that you're the person with all the answers, because at some point you're going to go for funding, and you're going to do a round, and you're going to deal with very sophisticated funders who have very tough questions. So you need to put together a business plan. You need to show the profitability. It's got to be realistic, and what the staff and group you have is to highlight each of them, and get yourself funded. But the key is listening skills. Can you draw out another human being and cut below the surface to understand their deepest anxieties and fears and their greatest hopes and dreams? Can you put yourself in the heart and mind of another human being and see the world the way they see it? Because whoever you're going to approach in life for this project, you're going to have a fundamental understanding of what their needs are and see it through their eyes. If you're going to go into entrepreneurship, you can forget living a normal life. Because if you want to go to every bachelor party, you want to go out drinking with the guys, you want to do all those things, there's nothing wrong with that in terms of values, but you get rolled in this hyper-competitive deal because they're the best and the brightest levitate towards these types of projects. And your competition in sports, entertainment, entrepreneurship is, again, people that are willing to outwork you, work during the weekends, willing to throw everything they have into it, and focus on problem solving. When you've got 20 different things that are concerns, don't freak out behind that. Just list them all and figure out the first priority of the accomplishments you need to make. And focus on that one, finish it, go to the second one. Don't be overwhelmed by the fact that you got to stay organized.
And persistent.
Well, persistence is key. You have to have a sense of optimism, a view that there's light at the end of the tunnel, a feeling like that. And what I tell athletes is stay in process. Instead of worrying over and over about the ultimate event, is this startup going to make it? Is it not? Do those things that will give you a better chance of success. Don't sit around thinking about, gee, I could have $5 million, or this could be unemployment.
I got to tell you, we've interviewed, a lot of guests here, and I'm an entrepreneur myself, and very much a student of the game, so to speak. And that was one of the most profound answers I think I've ever heard about practical advice to give an entrepreneur. So thank you so much for sharing that. So our last question is we're going to phrase a little differently. So outside of being a sports agent, Leigh is also involved in TV and entertainment, and several movies that I'm sure our guests have heard of, including Jerry Maguire and Every Given Sunday. So Every Given Sunday happens to be one of my favorite movies, and one of my favorite quotes. So I'm going to recite the quote, and then I would love for you to sort of give some insight or feedback on how these words may tie into entrepreneurship. All right, so the quote is, "You find out life's this game of inches, so is football. Because in either game, life or football, the margin for error is so small. I mean, 1.5 step too late or too early and you don't quite make it. 1/2 second too slow, too fast, and you don't quite catch it. In other words, were there any times in your journey where this idea of life is a game of inches, and how is that applicable to entrepreneurship?
It's present in every negotiation. It's present in every recruit of a younger player. Your sense of timing, understanding what needs to be done when, and what the moment is that you need to seize is critical.
Yes.
And you want to be out front, but you want to be ready before you go to market. You want to be so solid that when you hit market, you'll be great. But a sense of timing. But this is where research is so important.
Right.
It's understanding every bit of the economics of the field. It's understanding where the potential market is. It's understanding who your consumers are.
Right.
It's having a holistic sense of all the different factors that play in, and a battle plan that addresses them.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that and being here today. That is our final question. So we have some time now. If you can help our guests find out where they could find more information about projects that you're working on online, or any resources that you can recommend.
So if you go to Leigh Steinberg Speaks.com, but I tweet, I do a Wednesday Wisdom on Facebook and all the other social things. I just turned in my third book, which is called The Comeback, Resilience, Empathy, and What Matters. You can check that out. I have a previous book called The Agent, my 40-year career making deals and changing the game. So there's all those sorts of ways to check in. My first book was on the art of negotiation. It was Winning with Integrity, how to get what you want without losing your soul. So those are all ways. And, we take interns in our office, which is in Newport Beach.
Fantastic. Well, Leigh, we want to thank you so much for this interview. I think it was very inspirational, even for me. And congratulations with all your success.